Well, let's listen to this now. There's a Russian composer named Sergei Prokofiev, and he wrote a pretty famous piece of music called Peter and the Wolf. And it's actually a story, and you can see over on the right-hand side some depictions of Peter and the Wolf, and they've got it as a cartoon with characters playing, some people acting it out. But what's nice about Peter and the Wolf is that it introduces instruments to people who have never heard instruments before or don't know, they've listened to them, but they don't know what kind of instrument it is. And it's kind of a nice little foray into here's what an orchestra does. But also what's cool about it is typically they have uh, a narrator. And in this particular performance, the narrator is the conductor of the orchestra, the one who keeps everyone together. He is actually conducting and then turning around to the audience and narrating the entire Peter and the Wolf. Now, this is long. It's 30 minutes, so I don't want to show the whole 30 minutes, but I'll show you the first part of it, and then I'll send you the link so you can watch the rest of it and hear the story of Peter and the Wolf and how composers will often take little themes that depict something. Like, for instance, in this, it's depicting the animals that Peter and his grandfather in the story. So the bird, the wolf, the other little animals, and then Peter, the grandfather, the hunters that come looking for the wolf. And you'll hear how the composer sets up each melody. And when you hear the melody during this performance that's 30 minutes long, you'll say, oh, that's the theme song for Peter. Oh, that's the theme song for the wolf. That's the theme song. And you'll hear them in the composition that then Prokofiev sets up toward the end. And it's pretty ingenious what he did, and this has been used forever for teaching and introduction of the orchestral instruments. It doesn't have every orchestral instrument in it, but it does have many of them. This concept of using what is called leitmotif for listeners is used all across Western music. For instance, in a couple of orchestra pieces where it's just orchestra, no singing, no narration, they might have a theme song for, let's say they're doing a song on the Danube River. They'll have a theme for the Danube River, and you'll hear it come back when the composer was thinking specifically about the river, and it pops in, and the composer's like, I want to put more, of the river here, like floating down the river. Maybe I'm on the rapids of the river, and you'll hear these themes show up in orchestral music. In Wagner, who is a composer of opera, in his music, leitmotif is like so important because every character in the opera has its own music. So when you hear that music, you know that that character is either coming on the stage or is on the stage, or someone on the stage is thinking of that character. As in, let's say a girl is thinking of her lover, and it's a guy that she wants to marry. As she's singing about him, his theme, his melody will show up in her melody as she sings about him. So it's used very strategically from the composer. But let's listen just to the first part of this, and then you guys can hear this on at the conclusion of this, and you can listen to it on your own. It's really a cute little story.
Each character in this story is represented by a different instrument. The bird by the flute. The duck Clarinet. The grandfather by the bassoon. The wolf is represented by 3 hideous, nasty, ugly, smelly French horns. Scary. Peter is represented by the strings of the orchestra. And the rifle shots are represented by the timpani and the big bass drum. And so, if you're sitting comfortably and you're all relaxed, we can begin. Once upon a time.
So he goes into the story now about Peter and the Wolf, and you've been introduced now to the instruments and kind of the themes that will follow through this story. And, I don't know how this man does this. He's talking and narrating and conducting at the same time, which is just fascinating to me. But I can't imagine doing that. But he does it, and he does it successfully, so it's pretty incredible. You guys can go listen to this, and I'll leave a link in our Western Classical Music Forum area, and enjoy this. It's a really cute little story, and you can hear all the different instruments. They show them up close, so you can watch them play their instruments and how they work. The instruments that you saw were the flute was the first one. One of the differences between the flute that you guys talked about last week and this flute is that the holes, of course, it's made of metal, and the holes that are there. I'm trying to find the flute here. Sorry, and it's not wanting to show me. It's right before this. Hold on. Yeah, let me get to the flute. Hold on.
The bird by the flute.
So if you notice, it has a mouthpiece up at the top. It has that piece separates from the instrument, so you can take that apart. And these holes that she's covering with her fingers are actually, it's not the holes that she's touching, it's little pads that are on springs. And when she pushes down a metal kind of covering, the pad underneath the covering will cover the hole and seal it so that it will change the pitch. It's very hard for a flautist to make half steps with just one finger. So there are actually, as you were saying, those little da 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 that can be made with your finger in the flutes that you were discussing last week. Actually have different keys to push down to make those half step notes that would be used in the flutes that you were introducing last week, with just moving your finger across half of the hole. So in this particular case, the flutes do that, cover the holes completely. The end part of the flute also comes apart, so the flute is actually in 3 sections. The next instrument that they introduced was the oboe, this one. Now you notice that he has she had a mouthpiece, and she blows over the top of the mouthpiece to create, like you blow over a bottle and create the sound. He's actually blowing a double reed. The reed is made of bamboo. They're very, the craftsmanship on oboe reeds is very high and very difficult to make them. They're bound by a string, or it's actually it's a woven string, and then this area right here is a cork that goes into the instrument. The oboe is typically one piece. It might come apart. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I've messed with an oboe. But the oboe also has keys that you push down that have pads on them, so that they cover the holes. They also have, half step keys that go da 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 instead of da 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 da, instead of doing a whole step. The next one that he introduces,
The Cat by the Clarinet.
So this instrument has a mouthpiece, and you notice it's very different from the oboe that you just saw. It actually has a piece of plastic or wood that that has a ligature on it that holds a reed in place. So much like the oboe, it uses a bamboo reed, and the reed is underneath the mouthpiece. So when you put the mouthpiece in your mouth, the reed is under there, and it vibrates. The top of the mouthpiece does not vibrate. In an oboe, the instrument that I just showed you, the two reeds vibrate together. The bassoon, which is the next one to be heard, does the same thing as the oboe. It's a double reed instrument, so it has two pieces of bamboo that vibrate together, bound by string, that go into this particular neck here that is made of metal. The clarinet has multiple pieces. It has a piece here. It has a piece here, which is called the barrel. It has two pieces that are the playing part of it, the part that you put your fingers on, and then it has a bell at the bottom that expands. It's like a megaphone, kind of, that expands the sound at the bottom. It's small, but it helps expand the sound. The clarinet, unlike the flute, has some open fingers so that it doesn't have the pads over the top, but it has open spots on that's just where you put the finger down on the instrument, like the flute that you showed us last week. So you can actually do half steps with that, but there are also keys that allow you to do the half steps. And so that is the clarinet. That's actually my instrument. I played that all through elementary school, middle school, high school, and college. Right now, I'm terrible at it. I've pulled my clarinet out many times and tried to play through things that I could play when I was in college, and I cannot. It's pretty hideous. I guess that's the old adage: if you don't use it, you lose it. So if you don't use the clarinet, you lose your skill. Much like language learning. The last instrument that the last wind instrument that they're showing is the bassoon.
The Grandfather by the Bassoon.
So the bassoon has a kind of honky sound. It's lower in the register, so it's more low notes. Often the bassoon will play with the bass in the string section, so the violin, viola, cello, bass, the largest of the string instruments. Often the bassoon will mimic the bass or the cello even with their notes because they are playing in that lower register on the bass clef of the staff.
Wolf is represented by 3 hideous, nasty, ugly, smelly French horns.
So now this is the first introduction of a brass instrument. Although some of the other instruments have brass on them, the instrument here is a French horn. This is typically the precursor to these were calling horns for hunting. When they used to go hunting, they would use instruments much like this that were curved that would be their hunting da 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 when they were going hunting for whatever, birds or something. And they have, of course, obviously created something more than just the hunting horns that used to be used a long time ago with these convoluted curves and stuff in these instruments. The horns also, these French horns have 3 valves that you can push. And when you push the valves, it actually changes the pitch. However, it's whereas on wind instruments, the ones that you have previously heard about, the wind instruments, each note has a key to push down. In these instruments, yes, they have 3 valves, but that doesn't mean that they only play 3 notes. They actually have to change the way their mouth moves on their mouthpiece. There's no bamboo or anything like that on this. They actually blow into the mouthpiece like they're blowing something off their lip. You know, if something has gotten on your lip and you go like that and blow it off, that's their embouchure, which is the word for how they put this in their mouth and hold it to be able to manipulate the pitches while they are also actually using the valves. So this is a very hard instrument to play. In orchestras, let's say in a middle school or high school orchestra or band, these instruments are typically the ones, if someone is going to make a mistake, and you hear like a blatty sound like da da blah da da, it's typically the French horns. The French horn is a very difficult instrument to master. So the fact that these guys are playing so beautifully here, is great. And they are actually, of course, it's the Vancouver Symphony Orchestra. So these are professionals at their instrument. But I've been in a lot of choral situations. Rainbow, I don't know if she's still on, but she has 2 where you're listening to the orchestra and you're hearing mistakes, and they're usually coming from the French horn because it's just a very difficult instrument to learn. So here's the French horns. And you hear the French horn has low range, a very low range. One of those instrumentalists is playing the lower notes. One of the instrumentalists is playing some middle notes, and one of them is playing higher notes. So there are 3 pitches going on while they're playing, 3 different pitches, and they're creating the harmony there that you hear, this kind of a group sound of music. What's really nice is that the French horn also has a beautiful high range that is just lovely, and that's where they kind of get in trouble, is when they get up into the higher ranges. So usually the best players of the symphony are the ones that play the most consistent high notes in the French horn section. So the high notes are really the difficult ones. So they're usually the first chair. There will be a first chair, a second chair, and a third chair. And it's typically who can handle that, especially in this situation right here. Who handles those higher notes better than the other? And that's typical also in a high school or middle school band or orchestra. uh, a lot of times when you get such good players at the level of a symphony player, someone who's a professional, there's very little difference between the instrumentalists because they're just all so good. Anyway, so those are the brass instruments. And then let's look at the timpani, which I had spoken of earlier.
Is represented by the
strings first, sorry. Now here you see a typical layout of an orchestra. The strings are always in front and closest to the conductor. The strings are over here are the violins. Next to them, in kind of the left quarter of the orchestra over here, is the violas. Here in the front, on this side, are the cellos. And then in the back, you see these folks standing. Those are the bass players. So maybe they'll show a little bit of that more close up, and you'll see. I think the camera stays mostly on the violins at this point. So these are all the violin players. Typically, the first violins are in the front, the second violins are in the back, and the third violins, if they have them, are even further back than that. Sometimes they'll separate them differently. Yeah, so they don't really show the cellos and the basses over there. I think this is the timpani.
Rifle shots are represented by the timpani and the big bass drum.
So here's the big bass drum that he spoke of. This we use in marching. You'll typically see this if there's a marching band like that does parades or something. There will be someone who carries this drum on the front of their body and hits it. It's usually not at an angle like this, but straight up and down. And they'll hit both sides of this bass drum. But in an orchestra setting, the bass drum is usually angled like this, and the drummer is playing, on the side like this. Here are the timpani drums that I was speaking of earlier. Sometimes you'll just get one. Sometimes you'll get four, like that is here. I think this is his largest drum, and this is the smaller-headed drum. He has pedals down here. I'm not sure if you can see the pedals, but the pedals are all facing him. So if he needs to change the pitch of the drum, he can't do it loudly, and he has to literally bend down, listen to the drum, and thump the drum with either his finger or his mallet that he's playing with, and play it quietly in the middle of the song so he can change it without having a problem. Or he can just go to a different drum set, like this one or this one, if he's got those pitched. Probably they set up 4 different drums for each pitch that he was wanting for this particular piece of music. So let's hear them. So the drums are pitched bum, 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 bum. They're pitched that way. The lowest one is bum, and the highest one is bum. That's what they're pitching there. And then I think I'm not sure. And then he has to touch it to stop the sound from continuing to vibrate. Another problem with those drums is they have a tendency to have sympathetic vibrations with the orchestra. So if another instrument is playing, sometimes the drums will start vibrating on their own. So they keep little pads on them sometimes to keep them from vibrating while the orchestra is playing, which is, some people go, why do they set those things on those drums? And it's because they don't want them all vibrating at the same time. I think that's it. Is that
so? If you're
yes. So he's going to tell the story. So anyway, does anybody have any questions about those instruments? Yes. Yes. So they have each one of those timpanis has. They also call those kettle drums. By the way, that's another name for them. And they they have one pedal on them, so they can push the pedal to make it more taut or higher, or they can loosen the pedal to make it the drum head more loose and make it a lower pitch. So each one of those kettle drums has one pedal on it to make those changes in pitch. The other thing, I'm sorry, what? Sorry. Hold on a second. I have to go to another room. Somebody's decided. Somebody decided to mow their lawn right next door. Of course, my dogs are going to think, they're being attacked or something. So I'm sorry, I didn't hear your question. I'm sorry. Yes. So what he does is he's listening for the pitch. So while the orchestra is playing, he has to bend down, put his ear right close to the drum, tap it a little bit to see where the pitch is as he's pushing the pedal. So he pushes the pedal to change that pitch, but he has to do it in the middle of the symphony, so that's kind of tricky sometimes, for them. Yeah. Anybody else questions? Okay, I will post this link so you guys can go listen to that. It's really cute. It's a cute story, and it also shows you those light motifs that I was talking about. Those little melodies that go along with the particular characters in the orchestra. Um, one thing that you might one thing that I might clarify is that all symphony music or all orchestral music doesn't have leitmotifs in it. Some composers use it as a way to personalize or give a conceptual description, a musical description to specific scenes or concepts or ideas that they want to give to the listener. It's very interesting because I teach a piano piece to students, and I use it often because it's one of the songs that is on a list of compositions that they can play for a competition. And so I teach it at least to one student every year. And interestingly, I have the student learn the music, and then after they learn it, I ask them, what pictures are going on in your head while you're playing? And it is inevitable that as they learn the music, there is a picture that forms in their head about something. And when they describe the picture in their head, it is the same as everyone else's description. It is the strangest thing, but somewhere in that music, it is enacting something in each person's brain that is playing it that seems to be similar. Like when I play this section, I envision floating down a river with lily pads, and they'll even describe things as detailed as lily pads, and it's like it's very strange that I have not given them any cues about what to think about in the music. They have created their own thought processes as they learned the music, and it's very interesting that shows up the in in their learning process. And I would be interested, just if you heard the music, if everyone would come up with the same concepts if you just heard it and didn't actually learn it, learn to play it. That would be an interesting study for me to think about. Does that music evoke the same concepts when you just listen to it? So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you guys for listening and watching. I a bit to the oboe. I'm reading what you guys are saying.